Shruti-smriti-purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat-padam shankaram loka-shankaram shankaram shankaracharyam keshavam badarayanam sutrabhashya-kritau vande bhagavantau punah-punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahe Om Shanti 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 Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Dayakaram Dayakaram Dantan Dharma Pravartakam Pranamami Dayanandam Madacharya-varam param Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We can also chant the prayer verses. Today we're actually starting with them. So, Natva Shri Bharati Tirtha Vidyaranyamunishvaro Adhimahe Pañcadaśīṃ Kaivalyapada-siddhaye Namah Shri Shankarananda Gurupadambujanmane Savilasa Mahamohagrahagraseka karmane. So, yesterday we were seeing again some technical things that are there used in analysis of the teachings in Vedanta. We saw that also there is no contradiction for the Vedanta student. There's no contradiction for the Vedantin, because the attributes that we give for people, for the world, for Ishvara, the attributes that we give in generally to describe anything, they are not as real as we think they are. So we saw that attributes are superimposed, and the logicians, the ones who are raising the argument with us, for them the attributes are real. That's why the argument about we cannot describe Brahman, how can you use words to describe Brahman? All of these arguments are brought up because the understanding of Brahman is not clear. So this is again, all of this, Shankaracharya and the Acharyas create these opponents so that our logic and our knowledge becomes clear. That is the only reason for this. We also saw that for the uniqueness of Vedanta is the orders of reality. None of the other darshanas have this understanding of various orders of reality. And we know also there are three orders that are unfolded in Vedanta. One is the absolute standpoint, Paramartika Satyam, which is the one truth, unchanging, unmoving, all-pervasive, formless. We know this is the vision of Vedanta, one without a second, that is pure, limitless consciousness. So that is called Paramartika Satyam. From that standpoint, there is only one. If Brahman could talk, he would say, where is creation? Where is Ishvara? Where is Jiva? There's nobody there. I only exist. If he could talk, but it can't. But from the other standpoint, Vyavaharika, transactional reality, there is multiplicity. We do have, pairs of opposites constantly in this transactional reality. And we don't recognize the oneness despite the multiples. We don't recognize oneness. That is the whole idea here. Knowledge is to see oneness cognitively, even as I am seeing many in the world, even as I am going through pairs of opposites constantly. It is to recognize I am the one unchanging truth that is unaffected by all of the changing jagat. That is the whole idea here that we saw yesterday. So Vyavaharika Satyam is what, is created by Ishvara. Vyavaharika Satyam is a one word in Sanskrit, one way of understanding. Another thing, phrase you will hear many, many times in Vedanta is Ishvara Shrishti. Vyavaharika Satyam and Ishvara Shrishti are the same things. So don't get very confused about Sanskrit words, but just so you know, Ishvara Shrishti means Ishvara's creation. I did not create all this. I did not create the trees or the plants or the sky or the sun or the moon. The Jiva is not the creator of all of this, world, this universe. So there must be something that intelligently puts everything together. And that we have seen is the Vedic unfoldment of Ishvara. So from the Vyavaharika standpoint, there is multiplicity. There are many names and forms and functions, and they cannot be negated as false because I deal with it on a daily basis. I deal with all of the names and forms on a daily basis, and we cannot say it is an illusion, it is totally false. So that is why Vyavaharika Satyam unfolded in our Shastra as Mithya. Mithya is the key word here. It is Sadasadbhyam Anirvachaniya. You cannot say it's absolutely real. On the other hand, you cannot say it's absolutely unreal. It is a middle reality, and that is called Mithya. It is a dependent reality. Nothing in this creation, nothing that you perceive is an independent reality. You just have to examine any object that you perceive in this Jagat. You break it down cognitively and you recognize more and more everything is dependent on something else for existence. Every part is dependent on some more parts. Those parts are dependent on more parts, and it goes on, and it will go to infinite regression if not for Shastra Pramana saying that, no, it has an end. All of the parts resolving to other parts, it has an end. It has a basis. It has that consciousness limitless that is the basis for any projection error to take place. So this is what we saw, that Vyavaharika Satyam, and we saw also the third order of reality that Shastra speaks about, Pratibhasika Satyam. Pratibhasika Satyam is the Jiva's, individual's own projection on the Vyavaharika. So how do I project? I always project from my background. I project from my experiences. I project from the thoughts, certain thoughts that I have, thinking patterns that I've picked up, maybe not even in this lifetime. We come with many, many thinking patterns, vasanas, from previous lives also. And all of that, you can imagine, mixed together, forms a very messy mind for most of us. Very messy mind, because it cannot see what is very clearly. That is where Vedanta first gives clarity on the Vyavaharika level, removing the Jiva Shrishti or the Pratibhasika Satyam equals Jiva Shrishti. These are two synonyms. So what I project in the external world may not really be what it is in reality. But again, the mind has its own ways of functioning. We cannot blame ourselves because there is a psychological order governing the way I am. We have seen this again in the retreat. We saw this, that I cannot be different. Given my background, given what I have gone through in my life, there is no way I can be different. It is a law. This is the way the mind is, and the mind projects in this way also because of a law, order of psychology. But I find that my projections on the Vyavaharika, this is where we can make efforts. If my projections on Vyavaharika always leading to conflicts, always leading to some kind of stress, always leading to sorrowful situations, then instead of blaming the world, now that we are in Vedanta, what do? Not blame ourselves either. We don't shift the blame from the world and blame ourselves. No, we correct our vision. It's a very different thing. I don't blame the world. I don't blame myself. I correct my vision. And that vision correction comes through repeated Shravanam, listening to the words of Vedanta again and again, has a way of shifting the vision of anyone who surrenders to the Shastra as Pramana. So it all comes through the surrender to the words. We don't interfere with the ahankara saying, oh, but I read in this book. This book says something different. Sometimes the ahankara creeps in Shravanam as well, because we are well read. We have read a lot. We have heard a lot. We have experienced a lot of methods. We have been in the spiritual field, spiritual shoppers. We've all been at one time or other. Everybody goes through that spiritual shopping stage. And there are a lot of things that have entered our brain. And it's difficult for the eye to stop interfering with what is being heard. But when I fully surrender, there will come a time when it is not resisting what is being said. It sees for itself. That is where the Shastra gets assimilated more and more. And that shift, we were talking about that shift, cognitive shift, that's when it happens. So we saw this yesterday, and the orders of reality are very important in Vedanta because they are not brought in any other darshana, school of thought. It is purely in Vedanta alone that helps us understand what we experience is not as real as we think it is. We keep reminding ourselves, when we see that it is not as real, it cannot affect us the way it affects us. That is the whole idea here. So in the 52nd verse, he talks about this being unaffected. He says, Vikalpatadabhavabhyam asamsprishtatmavastuni vikalpitatva-lakshyatva sambandhadhyastu kalpitaha. So from the standpoint of absolute reality, the self, Atma, that is untouched, whether the mind has varying states or not, whether the mind is busy or quiet, from that absolute standpoint, it is untouched. That's what he says here. Vikalpatad abhavabhyam asamsprishta atma vastuni. So it is untouched. Notions such as, all these notions, it has attributes, it is an object to be indicated, it stands in relationship with something else. All of these things we have seen the logician bring up, he says, are merely superimposed. They are imagined at, all these attributes. That's what he says, vikalpi tattva lakshyatva sambandhadayaha tu kalpitaha. They are merely imagined, superimposed. So again and again we see this idea. Nirvikalpa means partless or changeless truth, existence, consciousness is untouched by any vikalpa, any changes, or the absence of changes. It is untouched by changes or absence of changes. I'll explain that absence through a very nice example I thought of. Atma Chaitanyam, so consciousness is uninvolved. Asangaha, uninvolved. It is this Paramarthika Satyam, and all names and forms are superimposed, projected onto that limitless truth, which is uninvolved in anything. So here, from the Vyavaharika standpoint, from the transactional reality, all the terms that we use, they only belong to the relative realm, relative order. So names and forms only belong to the relative order. Pairs of opposites only belong to the relative order. So words, even in the teaching belongs to which order? It belongs to the relative order. So Shastra here, it begins first by addressing your experience of the Vyavaharika or relative transactional order. We've seen it accounts for a creation using a methodology, Karana Karya methodology, Karana Karya or Karya Karana methodology, which is the cause-effect methodology, to explain that there is a cause for all the effects, explaining that the cause inheres the effects, and that is how the different names and forms come about. This is where the Shastra begins with its unfoldment, but it is only for the time being. In fact, after some time of studying Vedanta, what do we come to understand? That it is all superimposed. Even the methodology is superimposed. So you don't get scared when Shastra says there's no such thing as creation. Immediately, if you're told there's no such thing as creation, it could be a shock. So slowly, the teachings, they take away the reality that you give to creation, and call it adhyasa. It is adhyasa, it is a projection, because from the standpoint of Brahman, there is no division, there is no distinction, there is no difference at all. And the example that I, thought of, because there, in one of the buildings, I think in Manjakudi, when you walk into the hall, there is a huge mirror. You walk into the main room, and there's a huge mirror. And in the mirror, as many people are walking, you see, so many people busy moving here, moving there, different types of people, everything. It's a very busy mirror. But when you cover the mirror, it becomes a blank mirror, meaning there is no reflection seen. Busy mirrors or blank mirror talk only about the reflections, right? The reflections are moving about in the mirror. They're busy. If I cover the mirror, it's a blank mirror. It is also not reflecting at that time. But the mirror is always there. Absence of reflection, mirror is there. Presence of reflection, mirror is unaffected. It was never touched by the presence of reflections nor the absence of reflections. Exactly like our transactional reality. We function in this reality, but when I understand that I'm actually free from this reality, I belong to a different order of reality. I've always belonged to Paramarthika Satyam. But when I understand that more and more, I am released from all the connections, the attachments, the worries, the anxieties, the fears, everything that belongs to this transactional reality. So now with this, the topic of Brahman, he brings to a close, and he's going to, in the 53rd verse, talk about what Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam really are. Very interesting verse here. He says here, Ittam vakyestadarthanu sandhanam shravanam bhavet yuktya sambhavitatvanu sandhanam mananam tu tat. So you have to read that Tattva-viveka together. That's why you don't pause there. So he says here, thus, following the intended meaning of the sentences, ittam vakyes tad arthanu sandhanam, is what is called listening. Shravanam bhavet. Following the intended meaning of the sentences is called Shravanam. And he says, looking into that very meaning by reasoning until the truth stands firm with you, is until the truth clicks with you, until you understand that this is what Shastra is saying, yuktya sambhavita tattva-viveka. That is called mananam. That is called clearing all the doubts, mananam. So looking into the meanings of what has been heard in Shravanam and seeing that you don't have any kind of vagueness, doubts, you understand what is being said, is called mananam. So now he concludes the topic of Shravanam and Mananam with this verse. Shravanam we saw 33rd verse to 48th, Mananam from 49 to 52. And he says here, Shravanam, what is Shravanam? So what are we doing now? This is Shravanam, just listening. And what happens when we listen? Knowledge does take place. If the mind is backing the ears, of course. I hope everybody's mind is backing the ears. If it is backing the ears, even if the eyes are open, sometimes mind does not back the ears. So, mind is going somewhere else. Oh, I forgot to buy that at the supermarket. I should have picked up milk on the way back. Mind can go all over the place, right? So, mind has to back the ears for Shravanam to take place. And Shravanam takes place and knowledge is the gain during Shravanam. The knowledge is gained when handled by a traditional teacher, because it is a way of handling the words. And what happens? Where is knowledge produced? Is it produced in your right toe and your right foot? No, it is not produced on your toes or any other body parts. Knowledge always buddhi. So student gains this knowledge because of Shravanam, and it takes place in the intellect. And what does Shruti want to convey? So this is also very elaborately analyzed in Vedanta's text, beautifully actually. First of all, you have to see Tatparya. What is the purport? What is the main reason? What is the Vedanta? What does it want to convey? So to understand what it wants to convey, there is a method here called Shat Lingas. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but Shat Lingas, very interesting. And this you can apply to any kind of academic study as well. Have a look whether it works. But in Vedanta, this is what is used. First of all, see Upakrama, Upasamhara. See the beginning of a text and see the ending. What does it say at the beginning? You have to see the opening, the introduction and conclusion. Then you will start seeing what the context is of the text. So for example, in Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 6, what does it begin with? Sadeva Saumya idam agra asit. Only existence existed. There was only existence. In the beginning, there was only existence. And what does the end of the text in Chandogya, what is the last thing? It culminates chapter 6 in Tattva-viveka, you are that. So you can see the introduction begins with only consciousness existed, and it ends with identity, revealing the identity of you and that consciousness. In the same way, we have in Mundaka Upanishad, there are two birds, as we'll see when we do the Mundaka, two birds on a tree, a very famous analogy of two birds on the tree. One is experience flying around the tree all over the place, eating one fruit, eating another fruit, taking a bitter fruit, spitting out the bitter fruit, taking the sweet fruit, enjoying the sweet fruit, then eating another fruit, sour, spitting it out. This is called the Jiva bird, experiencing karma phalam. Jiva bird is flying all over the tree. And there is another bird. What's it doing? It is watching, only still watching the Jiva bird fly around. So what has happened with that Upanishad, that mantra of Upanishad, is that it has been taken out of context to prove Dvaitam, to prove duality. So many people have taken it, acharyas, because of course they don't want oneness. They like to live in duality. So they have taken it out of context without understanding the purport of the text. Remember, upasamhara, upakrama, upasamhara. You have to see the beginning of the text, the end of the text. You can't just take a mantra out of the middle and say, this is what is being said. It means you don't understand the mantra clearly. We will understand when we study Mundaka very clearly what is being expressed there. But then there's another, there are places like this where mananam is needed. Mananam is resolving the doubts. You will get doubt. How come two are mentioned? It is because all examples that we have in this transactional reality, all of them will be limited in some way, because we cannot have access to one in, through examples, but they all have a purpose, something to convey. So there's another in Gita, Krishna says, Mame Vamsho Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha, that the Jiva is a part of me. He says the Jiva is part of me and it is eternal. So he actually says that in Gita. He doesn't say the Jiva is me. But we understand what Krishna is really saying by that is from the Vyavaharika viewpoint. Vedanta, all the texts, if you take together, they reveal Tattva-viveka, oneness alone. So we have to see what is Krishna saying when he talks about it, because again, that verse is taken out of context and another school of thought is born, because somebody wants to feel a part of Ishvara. An acharya has gone and created qualified non-dualism, taking verses like that and out of context. So we have lots of great thinkers who are let their emotions take over analysis of Vedanta. That's why you require very rational thinking, logical thinking to understand and take everything. A whole picture in Vedanta has to be seen. So this is called the first one, seeing the introduction, seeing the end. That is the first method of analysis. Then the second one is called abhyasa. Abhyasa here, we saw abhyasa as a advice of Krishna when we talked about the mind. If you remember the last sessions, abhyasa was something, keep practicing. Here it doesn't mean practice all the time. It means repetition, abhyasa. The topic of Vedanta should be repeated again and again throughout the text. You see it, sometimes people say, why is it being said again and again? Abhyasa is a technique. When something is important, it is talked about again and again and again. It is not for repetition. It is reiteration, reinforcement. There's two other words in English, reiteration, reinforcement, not repetition. So abhyasa actually means it means repeatedly covered, but you understand it as reinforcement. What is the topic? You have to see, to understand the purport of Vedanta, what is it that's being talked about again and again and again in all the text? It is oneness. You can see all the Upanishads talk only about one thing. They don't suddenly go into duality. It's one thing. And the third word to analyze is called apurvata. Apurvata means the subject matter of Vedanta has to be something unique. Otherwise, it's useless. We can read in any other text, right? There are so many books out there. Apurvata means it has to be something unique. So Shastra Pramana, is it unique? Does it have its own subject matter not available for other means of knowledge? Yes. It is not available for any other means of knowledge. And as I said, anything that says the same thing as Vedanta text is called Vedanta for us. It doesn't matter which culture or language it is in, but it is a pramana because it reveals something that my senses cannot reveal or any other means of knowledge reveals. So it has apurvata, it is unique. It is not something I can know through anything else. And Shastra does not come to reveal that there is duality, because we already know that. So as I said, thousands of years, this knowledge is being handed over by teacher to student becomes teacher, teacher, student, like this. It's been handed over for so many thousands of years, not handed over to explain you are different. Duality is a reality. No, it is not for that. It is not, I already know I'm distinct from everybody else. I know I'm different from Ishvara. Already know that. So the fourth aspect I have to look at is phalam. Is there a result that is talked about in the text? Is there a result that talked about in Vedanta? And yes, we see that result all over the place in the form of jnani, the lakshanas describing the wise person. We see that result in every text. We see limitless result. Even it sounds contradictory, you cannot really have a limitless result, but it is limitless. The result itself is without limitation, never ending. So that is the result. It does talk about a result. And Arthavada is the fifth aspect of analysis. It's called glorification. Is the knowledge, what is illustrated, is it glorified through different sayings? And you can see that in many of the texts, like in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Brihad means big. Aranyaka means forest. Big Forest Upanishad. I thought Sweden will love that one. Big Forest Upanishad. It is so huge that take a lifetime to study that. I remember Puja Swamiji saying, when you're teaching, if you quote and you forget where it's from, say it is from Brihadaranyaka because nobody can find it there. It's so big. So people want, Puja Swamiji used to tell us, just say Brihadaranyaka. So anyway, it is that such a big Upanishad. There is a line that says Atma Vare Drashtavyaha. Atma is to be seen. Atma Vare Shrotavyaha. It is to be heard. Nidita Septavyaha. It should be contemplated upon. So it is praised, it is glorified. Atma is the one thing to be heard about, the one thing to be listened about, the one thing to be contemplated on. So this is praised as the most worthy of all pursuits. And then the fifth thing is that it should be logical. I think this is the sixth. This should be the sixth is upapatti, which is logic. The tatparya or the purport should be logical. It should not contradict your thinking. It is not to be swallowed blindly believing. That is why, logic comes a lot in Vedanta. It should not contradict your thinking. It should make sense to you. And it does have a logic. If we look into it, we see in our own experience, actually no one can argue with whatever Vedanta says because it does not contradict our human experience. Anywhere we are, all human beings can identify with Vedanta because it doesn't contradict what you go through. What are the things we go through? We see whatever begins has an end. We can't say that we have not experienced that in our life. Whatever has begun has an end. That is logic. This is called logic. And here we're talking about, karma phala. That is how Shastra brings it in. When something is a result of karma, of action, it will definitely have a beginning, it will have an end. So this is how it very logically unfolds what is taking place in our lives. So as I said, Puja Swamiji used to say, Vedanta doesn't really teach you anything. Your life teaches you. Vedanta helps you assimilate your life. So that is what the teachings actually do. And you can't argue with it. It doesn't contradict also your pratyaksha. It doesn't contradict your sense powers because it is a different sphere of operation. It talks about imperceptible. So eyes can't negate. No, I don't see Brahman, so it doesn't exist. No, because Brahman is not seen with eyes anyway. Shastra says that. So the eyes have no right to negate what they can't see anyway. Ears have no right to negate consciousness because it can't be heard. There are many, many mantras that reveal consciousnesses cannot be approached by sense organs anyway. So different orders of reality when we see as well, that also makes sense, logic. You can see that when it is unfolded. There is a truth to it. So all of this is used. It is logical, and the tatparya becomes very clear. What is being intended becomes very clear. All of this takes place in Shravanam. But what is Mananam? What is, more in the clearing the doubts? As I said, just bringing the logic the possibility of what Shastra is revealing is called Mananam. Possibility meaning you give the benefit of doubt to Vedanta. Okay, I believe. I believe there is something like Brahman. I'm committed to understanding that. It is a Shraddha. More than belief, it is Shraddha. It is a commitment pending discovery. I'm committed to understanding what these words are saying. I'm committed to discovering it. Until I discover, I am going to be committed. That is called believing in the possibility of what is being said in the Shastra and clearing the doubts regarding the possibility. The possibility becomes more and more probability. Finally, it becomes a reality. So you go from possibility to probability to reality. That is how Mananam clears the doubts. And it's, if there's any doubt during Shravanam, if there's doubt in understanding, then Shravanam is not fully complete. So one has to do a bit more Shravanam for the doubt-free knowledge to take place. And doubt-free knowledge is not, again, it takes a long time to get totally doubt-free knowledge. Jnanam, knowledge may be there, but doubt-free knowledge may not be there. So there's a difference. Jnanam is knowledge which is gained through listening. But jnanaphalam, which is the result of jnanam, is also necessary. So if I, for example, when I go into a room and I switch on the light, the darkness should go. The light should come on. But I can assume if something's covering the bulb, then the light doesn't shine, right? That is called obstruction to knowledge. It is still shining, but something is covering still. So this is what, clear knowledge means. Clear knowledge should have clear result. It should have clear phalam. So jnanam itself is liberation. Gain of this knowledge is liberation. But when the result is not fully assimilated, what's another problem that we have? We think when jnana phalam, the result is not fully assimilated, there will always be the thinking, what do I have to do now? I have to do something else. That feeling will be there. Is there something else to be done? No. That means knowledge is not fully understood because, again, I'm working in the realm of theory and practice. Vedanta is nowhere near theory and practice. Everything else may have theory and practice. Yes, study Vedanta, then, many people tell me, Swamini, I'm not able to practice Vedanta. Who asked you to practice to be Brahman? You are Brahman. There's no theory and practice. You cannot sit and practice being Brahman. You can practice other things. You can practice pranayama. You can practice yoga asanas. There are many things we can practice which help us discover. But we cannot practice jnanam. We cannot practice being a jnani. Actually, it might be quite good sometimes if you can imagine yourself a jnani. Maybe you'll feel a bit freer inside. So, sometimes as a practice you could, but it's not fully established knowledge. But it is not theory and practice here. The problem, it is mainly after even Shravanam has been done, because the Shravanam is quite easy, simple. Tattva-viveka is all you need to know, actually. That can finish in like 2 minutes. Class should be over and everybody should go away enlightened. We don't need to come back for next class. But it doesn't work because there is pratibandha, obstacle. Covering is there. Like if I open a tap, the tap, I've opened the tap, but the water doesn't come, it doesn't flow through the tap because there's some block there. The tap is open, that is, knowledge has been gained. The block is that phalam has not been gained. So it is flowing, but it's blocked. So we have to see where the block is. This is where most of our efforts come into the picture because of the blocks. And where is the block? So the first block may be that the mind is not fully prepared. The sadhana chatushtaya with the qualifications required for knowledge to take place. And we know there's huge lists of qualifications in all the texts. But don't worry, I'm going to remove all the worry. You don't have to gain all the list. Even if you have one or two from the list to some measure, not absolute measure. Nothing is absolute. Even one or two you practice, like ahimsa, non-hurtfulness, non-injury to others, not hurting. That's a beautiful quality. Kshantihi, another one that Krishna talks about in Gita, accommodating others with all their rough edges, more and more. Whatever they are, I learn to accommodate because Atma accommodates everything in the whole universe. Can I not accommodate my mother-in-law? Can I not accommodate just a few people in my life? Whatever they are, that is kshantihi. I can practice kshantihi. We have different ones, amanitvam, adambitvam, pretense. Don't need to pretend to be somebody. There's a beautiful adambitvam quality that Krishna talks about, the 13th chapter. Sometimes we have the pressure to pretend to be somebody we're not. Why? Because we want to be accepted. So, people in the world, they do all sorts of things to get accepted. You have to feel sorry, pretend to be somebody else, dropping names, all of this. Oh, I had tea with the queen or the king yesterday. They will tell everybody what happened. They want everybody to know. And instead of feeling, oh, they're showing off or why are they saying this, actually have compassion because what Shastra says, it reveals that the person really dislikes themselves so much that they have to tell everybody what they have done or what they have achieved so that they will like themselves. What they're really saying by telling everybody, broadcasting their things they have, some people broadcast, some people even make up things they don't have to feel accepted. So what they really are saying is that I don't accept myself as I am. If you accept me, I'll accept myself. Anybody who brags, you think of this line. That is what they're really feeling inside. Otherwise, they will not need to tell you everything, right? I did this, I did that, I've got that. So all of these are things that prepare the mind. I watch myself. What is the necessity to tell everybody what I've done? I have to see all of this. This is called alert living. So jnanam, the pratibandhas removed by watching the mind, the qualifications, some of them I have to deliberately, this is where deliberate practice comes. I have to take a few of them up in my life and alertly see, am I practicing them? Am I gaining? And practice, remember, makes perfect. Even if I slip, I keep going. I keep practicing until the mind becomes that quality. It takes time. You cannot change the mind overnight. Everything, but unless we practice, we will never gain the qualification. It's with anything, even in worldly life, gaining a university qualification. If you want to master a particular subject, you need to be with the subject, right? You need to practice it. Same here. It is self-knowledge is the subject, and it requires different type of qualifications. This is where I practice. So that is the first way. Manana takes care of all the doubts that have arisen in Shastra, but the main pratibandha we have is emotional problems. Emotional problems stop this knowledge flow. They block the tap of knowledge to flow to us and bless us. And what takes care of emotional problems? This is where the next few verses, he will begin the topic of nididhyasanam. Nididhyasanam is there to take care of emotional problems. There in nididhyasanam, you don't gain new knowledge. There's no new experience also to be gained there. It is only for removing the obstruction to knowledge that you already have. So the first aspect of nididhyasanam is to maintain the sadhana chatushtaya, the qualifications of the mind, monitoring your life and how you're interacting with the world. Unless you're in the world, you cannot monitor this. So the world becomes a school for us. Unless I'm in school, I cannot grow. So the life becomes a school. I'm in the world and I have to note the reactions. Why am I reacting this way? What is triggering me? All of this. People don't have time to note their reactions. So it's a very good exercise to do this. And so a life of alertness is the first step in Nididhyasanam. Being alert to what I think, what I say, and what I do. Dwelling on the Shastra is the second aspect of Nididhyasanam, and that is dwelling upon the words of the vision. First is taking care of the emotional issues. Alongside, I start dwelling on the words. Aham nishkriyaha. I am a non-doer. Aham nirgunaha. I am attributeless. Aham satchidanandaha. I am existence, consciousness, limitless. These are the words that reveal the real nature of I. So that is the dwelling, which comes in the second part of Nididhyasanam. We'll see more tomorrow about that. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.